There are stories that do not begin with an event. They begin with an emptiness, not pain, not loss, but a feeling that is very hard to name. A silence in the middle of paradise. Imagine standing in a place of absolute perfection. No lack, no fear, no death. Everything you see is so beautiful that it cannot be described. But then you realize something. You have no one to share it with. That was the first state of humanity. Before the first mistake, before sin, before the first tears ever fell on earth, a feeling had already appeared: loneliness. And the frightening part is that even paradise itself could not fill it. Prophetic history explained welcomes you. If you love deep and meaningful religious history stories like this, do not forget to subscribe and support us so we can continue bringing you even better content in the future. The story of Hawwa does not begin with a fall. It begins with a heart that was searching. The first human being was created from earth, given a soul, and placed in the most perfect place that had ever existed. Yet he was still missing the one thing that would make everything complete. Adam lived among endless green gardens, clear rivers, and scenes of beauty beyond what the human imagination today can even reach. But in the middle of all that, there was a silence that could not be filled. A silence that did not come from the outside, but from within. Every creature was created in pairs. Birds had mates, animals had companions. Everything moved in balance and connection. Only Adam was alone. No one to speak to, no one to share his thoughts with, no one to reflect his feelings back to him. And in that moment, a truth was revealed. The human being was not created to exist alone. But Allah did not immediately remove that feeling. He allowed Adam to feel it. He allowed it to spread through his heart. He allowed it to become a true longing. Because only when a heart understands absence can it truly appreciate presence. Then a moment came. No noise, no blinding light, no thunder of a miracle. Just a quiet change, yet one of enormous greatness. Adam fell asleep. Not an ordinary sleep, but the beginning of something humanity would carry through all of history. From Adam's own body, from a part hidden deep within him, a new life began to form. Not from earth, not from fire, but from man himself. And when Hawwa opened her eyes for the first time, the world she saw was not a strange place. It was a place full of light, full of peace. But what made her heart move was not the beauty around her. It was a person lying beside her. She had never met Adam. She had never heard his voice. She did not know his name. But a feeling appeared instantly, without explanation, without being taught. A closeness so natural that it felt as if she had always belonged there, as if he were a part of her. That was not merely a meeting. It was the completion of what had been missing. When Adam awoke, the first thing he saw was not the gardens of paradise. It was a living being standing before him. A being who made his heart feel something he had never known before. No more emptiness. No more heavy silence. Only a feeling that human beings would later describe in many ways. Yet its essence would never change. Peace in being beside the one who belongs with you. Hawwa was not created from Adam's head to stand above him. She was not created from his feet to be beneath him. She was created from a place near his heart, to be beside him, to walk with him, to share everything that had once existed only in silence. And from that moment on, paradise was no longer just a place of beauty. It became a place of meaning. But here, another truth also began to take shape. That even in a perfect place, even where there is love and connection, the human being will still have to face something unavoidable, a test. Because love is not the end, of the story. It is only the beginning. There is a strange truth about human beings. We are often not destroyed by what is clearly forbidden, but by what we think we can get close to without consequence. And that is exactly how the first test of humanity was set. Not through lack, not through suffering, but through a single boundary in the middle of endless freedom. Adam and Hawwa were not living in a harsh world. They did not have to struggle to survive. They did not have to worry about tomorrow. They did not have to fear what would come next. Everything had been given to them in fullness. They could go anywhere, enjoy anything, touch every beauty paradise contained. There were no barriers, no shortage, no feeling of restriction. And in that setting, one command was given, not to limit them, but to define them. Do not go near that tree. Not do not eat, not do not touch, but do not go near. A sentence that sounds simple, yet carries a depth many people do not notice. Because when something is forbidden from such a distance, it is no longer only a forbidden act. It becomes a boundary, a line dividing obedience from stepping beyond the limit. What is worth reflecting on is this. Allah did not need to place any boundary at all. He could have allowed them to live in a paradise with no test, no choice, no possibility of error. But if that had happened, the human being would never truly become human. Because the value of obedience only exists when disobedience is possible. And so, in the middle of endless freedom, one point alone was marked. Not to take something away, but to give them something greater. Responsibility. That boundary was not just a tree. It was a question. A silent question placed inside their hearts. What will you choose when you have the power to choose? In life, human beings often think sin begins with the act itself. But in this story, we see something else. The mistake did not begin when the hand touched the forbidden fruit. It began at the moment the feet moved closer. A very small step. A distance that seemed harmless. But that distance was exactly where everything changed. Do not go near. That sentence was not only for Adam and Hawwa. It is a principle, a warning for all humanity. There are things that do not seem dangerous from far away, but become dangerous when we move a little closer. And the greatest danger is not when we know we are doing wrong. It is when we start believing that just a little bit will not hurt. In paradise, there was no hardship to use as an excuse for crossing the boundary. No pressure, no forcing circumstances. That is what made this test purer than any later test on earth. Because this was not a test of survival. It was a test of loyalty. Adam and Hawwa were not forced to choose. They were free. And that freedom is what gave their choice meaning. There is something deeply profound in the way Allah set this test. He did not say, "Do not eat, or you will be punished immediately." He did not threaten. He did not force. He simply placed a boundary and allowed the human being to decide which side of it to stand on. That is the essence of life afterward. Not a chain of things imposed on us, but a chain of choices. And every choice is a step either closer to or farther from what is right. In that moment, paradise was no longer only a place of beauty. It became a space of meaning. Every action, every step, every decision carried value. Not because of an immediate consequence, but because it reflected what existed inside the heart. That single boundary stood silently in paradise. It did not move, did not force, did not speak. Yet its silence made it stronger than any other command, because it did not need constant reminders. It only needed to exist and wait to see what the human being would do. And perhaps the most frightening thing is not that the human being crosses the boundary. It is that the human being begins to think the boundary no longer matters. The first test of humanity was not some massive trial, not a war, not a great sacrifice. It was only something very small, a distance, a step. But sometimes the smallest steps are the ones that change an entire destiny. Not every battle begins with noise. Some battles happen in silence, unseen by anyone, without warning. And the most dangerous part is that they happen inside the human mind itself. That is the one place no one else can enter, except the one who swore to mislead humanity until the final day. Shaitan did not return to paradise through force. He did not break down gates. He did not confront directly. He came like a passing thought, so light it almost seemed unreal. But that very lightness is what made human beings lower their guard. At first, nothing changed. Adam and Hawwa still lived in peace. There was no sign of danger, no fear, no reason to be suspicious. And exactly in that state of calm, a voice began to slip in, not into the ears, but into thought. Is it really forbidden? Or have you simply not understood why? The question was not rebellious. It did not pressure. It did not command. It simply opened a very small crack in thought. Another possibility, another angle. And once a question enters the mind, it does not disappear easily. Shaitan did not need to say much. He only needed to plant a seed, one idea, then let the human being water it. Little by little, certainty began to shake. Not because they wanted to oppose the command of Allah, but because they started to think in a direction that had never existed in them before. And that was the point where everything changed. He did not say, "Do wrong." He said, "Are you sure you are not missing something?" A whisper like that is enough to turn something forbidden into something worth thinking about. And once something becomes worth thinking about, it soon becomes worth considering. Shaitan understands the human being very well. He does not attack obvious weakness. He attacks the deepest desires, the desire to become better, the desire to be closer to what is sacred, the desire to rise beyond one's current state. He spoke to them about immortality, about becoming like the angels, about never leaving paradise. But the most dangerous part was not the promises themselves. It was the way they were presented, not as temptation, but as opportunity. And that is when the human being begins to persuade himself. Adam and Hawwa did not immediately move toward the tree. They paused. They thought. They struggled inside. And that inner struggle is where everything was decided. Shaitan did not force them. No one compelled them. It was their own thoughts slowly changing the way they saw the boundary that had been placed before them. At first, they remembered. They clearly knew the command. But then that memory began to fade. Not because they forgot it entirely, but because it was crowded out by new thoughts. Thoughts that sounded reasonable, harmless, even right. Maybe this is not as bad as I thought. That is the most dangerous moment. Because when a person begins to justify a wrong thing, he has already moved very close to doing it. Shaitan did not need to stay until the end. Once the seed had been planted, once doubt had taken root, once desire had begun to grow, he only needed to step back. Because from that point on, the human being would do the rest. And then, what had once been a boundary became only a distance. Their eyes began turning toward the tree, not with defiance, but with curiosity, not with fear, but with hesitation. And inside that hesitation, something very important disappeared. Caution. Human beings do not fall in one explosive instant. They fall through a chain of small thoughts, gathering one by one, until the line between right and wrong is no longer clear. That is how the whisper works. It does not destroy immediately. It blurs. It does not make a person rebel. It makes him think. And once thought is no longer controlled, it becomes the road leading to action. The real battle was not at the tree. It was inside the minds of Adam and Hawwa. A battle with no sound, no visible form, yet one that would determine the destiny of all humanity. And the most frightening part is that battle never ended. There are moments in life when everything changes, not through a storm, but through a very small act. A decision that seems insignificant, yet is enough to bring down an entire world. And the most frightening part is that when human beings realize it, it is already too late to go back to the way things were. That moment had come. There was no thunder, no sign of warning, nothing to show that what they were about to do would change the destiny of all humanity. Only a very light silence and an act done in hesitation. They moved closer. No more distance. No more clear boundary. And then they reached out. The forbidden fruit was not touched as a symbol of rebellion. It was not taken in defiance. It was touched in a very human moment. A moment when reason had been covered over by thoughts that had been fed for too long. Not because they wanted to oppose Allah, but because they had been led to the point where wrong began to take on the appearance of right. And then they ate. Nothing happened immediately. No pain. No instant punishment. But in a single moment, everything changed in a way deeper than any punishment could have done. Something they had never known before suddenly appeared in their minds. Awareness? But before that, they lived in total purity. There was no shame, no consciousness of needing to cover anything, no sense of right and wrong in the way human beings would later understand it. But now they saw one another differently. No longer with unconditional peace, no longer with the innocence of the beginning. They became aware of their nakedness, and their first response was not excuse, not denial, not blame. It was a deeply natural instinct. They tried to cover themselves. They hurried to gather leaves from paradise, not because anyone told them to, but because something new had appeared within them, a feeling that had not existed before. Shame. And that feeling was the first sign that they had stepped into a different state of existence, one that humanity would carry forever. Then the voice came. Not an angry voice, not an immediate punishment, but a question carrying the full weight of truth. Did I not forbid you from that? Did I not tell you that Shaitan is a clear enemy to you? There is nothing more painful than being reminded of what you already knew, yet failed to hold on to. Those words were not only a reminder, they were a mirror reflecting the entire act that had just happened. Impossible to deny, impossible to escape. And in that moment, they understood. No explanation was needed, no argument, no search for reasons. They understood that what had happened was not an accident, but a mistake. And most importantly, they understood that the mistake was their own. There was no blaming. Adam did not turn to Hawwa. Hawwa did not shift responsibility onto Adam. There was no because of, no if only. No attempt to soften what had happened. Only truth and hearts breaking as they recognized it. And then, from deep inside them, words came. Not an excuse, but a plea. Our Lord, that we have wronged ourselves. If you do not forgive us and have mercy on us, we will surely be among the losers. That was not just a prayer. It was a return, a complete return, with no pride left inside it, no attempt to hide anything. They did not ask for the consequence to disappear. They asked for forgiveness. And that is exactly where this story becomes different. Human beings are not defined by never making mistakes. Mistakes are unavoidable. What defines them is how they face those mistakes, whether they choose to remain inside them or turn back. In that moment, Adam and Hawwa were no longer only human beings in paradise. They became truly human. Human beings who know what it means to be wrong, us to hurt, to feel shame, and to return to the one who created them. But forgiveness does not always mean everything returns to what it was before. Paradise is the place of absolute purity, and they had stepped out of that state. Not because they were utterly rejected, but because they now needed a new journey. A journey in which they would live with what they had learned, with awareness, with responsibility, with choice. The moment they ate from the forbidden tree was not the end. It was the beginning. A beginning no longer shaped by innocence, but by understanding. And from there, the story of humanity truly began. Not every beginning starts with light. Some beginnings are written through separation, not because human beings are abandoned, but because they are sent into a journey where they must learn how to live, how to trust, and how to return in a world that is no longer perfect. The moment they left paradise was not merely a physical descent. It was a total transformation. From a place where everything was given to a place where everything had to be sought. From unconditional peace to a life full of trials. But what made that moment most painful was not the new environment. It was the separation. Adam and Hawwa were not placed on earth together. One was in a distant land, the other in an entirely different place. No map, no sign, no way of knowing where the other was. Only one thing remained between them: memory, and a longing that could not be touched. Hawwa stood in a dry and burning land where there were no endless green gardens, no clear rivers flowing through, no more sounds of paradise, no more feeling of being surrounded by perfection. For the first time, she felt isolation in an entirely different way. No longer as the feeling of lacking someone to share life with, but as the pain of knowing that person exists and is still out of reach. Adam was the same. In another place, far away, he carried that same emptiness. But now the emptiness was no longer vague. It had form. It had a name. It was Hawwa. And between those two human beings on opposite sides of the world, something began to rise. Prayer. Not a prayer to return to paradise. Not a complaint about their condition, but a call directed to Allah, with hearts that now understood more clearly than ever that there is nowhere to return except to Him. Day after day, they lived, not as before. Every day carried its own test. They had to learn how to survive, learn how to find food, and learn how to adapt to a world that no longer responded automatically to every need. Hawwa, who had never needed to worry about anything, now had to face nature, hardship, and the uncertainty of each passing day. But one thing did not change: hope. Every morning, she woke up with the same desire. Not something grand, just one simple thing: to be reunited with the one she had been created to be beside. A longing repeated day after day, with no immediate answer, no certain sign that it would happen. Yet she continued to pray. Because some prayers are not answered immediately, not because they are rejected, but because they are being prepared to be answered in a more perfect way. And then that moment came. No announcement, no miraculous sign in the sky, just two human beings who, after a long journey of patience and hope, finally stood before one another, at a place that would later be called Arafat, where recognition, reunion, and completion happened once again. No words were needed, no explanation. Everything they had been through, the distance, the longing, the silent prayers, came together in that single moment. The separation was over. But their story did not end there. They did not return to paradise. They remained on earth. And from there, a new role began. No longer two people living in a perfect world, but the ones who would lay the foundation for all humanity. Hawwa became the first mother, and with that came a joy she had never known before. New life, children, a family beginning to take shape. But with that joy came a pain she also had never known. One day, among her own children, something happened that had never existed in the world before. Conflict, jealousy, and then violence. Qabil and Habil. Two names, two human beings, two choices. And the choice of one led to an act with no previous example. One life taken by the hand of a brother. There are no words that can fully describe the pain of a mother who has to witness that. Not losing a child to disaster, not to illness, but through another one of her own children. That pain is not only loss, it is the breaking of something she had believed was most sacred. Family. Hawwa was not only the first woman, she was the first to experience a pain that would repeat itself over and over through human history. When people turn against one another, when blood is spilled without justice, when envy wins over kinship. And if we look at the world today, we can see that story never truly ended. Billions of human beings, all coming from one single pair. Yet instead of living like one family, they continue repeating the same mistake. Conflict, war, indifference to the suffering of others. If Hawwa could see the world today, perhaps her heart would break all over again. But her story is not only a story of pain, it is a reminder that from the beginning, human beings were given a choice, and they still have that choice every day, between repeating the mistake or changing it. The deepest lesson in this story is not the fall, it is the return. Human beings are not defined by never making mistakes, because mistakes are unavoidable. What defines you is how you respond after you have made one. Will you sink deeper into it, or will you stop, face yourself honestly, and return to Allah? In our lives today, this appears in very small choices every day. But when you stand before something wrong, do you stop while there is still a safe distance? Or do you move a little closer? When a negative thought appears, do you control it or allow it to grow? When you make a mistake, are you brave enough to admit it and correct it? Or do you look for a way to hide it? These questions are not theory. They are decisions shaping your life every single day. If there is one thing we can learn from Hawwa, it is this: never lose hope in the mercy of Allah. No matter how far you have gone, no matter what mistake you have made, the door of return is always open, as long as you truly want to come back. If you feel that stories like this help you understand yourself more deeply, understand faith more deeply, and understand life more deeply, so then join the Prophetic History Explained community to explore more meaningful stories about the prophets, Islamic history, and lessons that can be applied right now in modern life. And do not forget to subscribe to support us so we can continue bringing you deeper and more valuable content in the videos ahead.